Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Well, we made it to the final episode of The Way of Kings. And Slava, I have a surprise for you.
I see.
Well, you see, but the people don't see. And I was just going to have this ominous voice start talking to you because all they hear is audio. But I guess I'll introduce him. We have a special guest today who is also a Cosmerian. He has read the entire Cosmere multiple times, like myself. He and I are friends here in real life and not just on the internet, like Slava and I are. And I asked him to join us to talk with Slava on his first read-through, because oftentimes Spencer and I will see each other about once a week, maybe twice a week, and we will almost instantaneously just go back into theories about the Cosmere, which is fun for us, but we regularly reminisce about how it was reading it for the first time. And then I mentioned that I'm doing a podcast here with Slava, and Spencer started listening to it, and I was like, hey, at the end of Way of Kings, do you want to jump on and grill Slava for all the information that he has or hasn't picked up? And he was like, I'd love to. Something like that happened.
Maybe. It was close to something like that. He might have had to pull me along a little harder than that, but here I am.
Give or take a little bit. A little coercion. So, okay. Well, Slava, why don't you give Spencer just a quick synopsis, because he did get to hear some of the episodes, but I know that we're recording this before all of them have published. So just give him like a quick rundown of your initial thoughts and feelings about the world, the characters, and the plot. Just like a 2 or 3 minute summary.
Sure. Well, this is my third Sanderson piece that I'm reading. I started The War of Kings, and then we read a short story. That's one of our, I think it's the second or first episode, which was Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell.
Okay.
So starting this book, I already went into it at least 85% confident that I would like it, because I've liked Sanderson so much in those two pieces. Really liked him. So I'm like, all right, this is most likely going to be a 3 for 3 for me. And it was the case.
Yeah.
What I enjoyed most is, I think, the world. Because the characters, I think before we started recording, we were talking, I said, and I know that the listeners already heard me say this 1,000 times, I like the pace of the writing, and I like that the characters are not two-dimensional. He really writes characters well. What I did find interesting is there was a lot more description about the world in this book. And the magic system, and even the high storms, and some of the animals that live here. You kind of pick up on things that, like, oh, these high storms really affect the landscape, and even the flora and the fauna and all the other stuff. So that stood out as something interesting that kept me intrigued. I wanted to learn more and more as the chapters unfolded. And the desolations, like the way it starts out with this hook, and then there's 4,500 years of silence, 4,700 years of silence, whatever. Yeah. And then there's, odium comes, or odium reigns. And that kept me hooked. Outside of the usual stuff that we said I fanboy out on about Sanderson, outside of those usual things, what is a desolation in greater detail than we get in the beginning? Why is it coming? It had Tent, I think his name is Tent. Has he been really, in whatever he is in the place of nightmares, has he been holding it back by himself? Because these people broke the oath pact.
Yep.
So how did the desolations not come for 4,500 years? Or was that Odium's Ray's plan all along that, hey, these guys, vomit us out of this thing and just forget the oath pack. I got what I need. Is that it? And so, like, just processing all those assumptions, as Jonathan and I call them, Slava's assumptions for the Cosmere, that kept me hooked throughout the book. And yes, the stories and the story arcs of the characters and everything they're going through, but that was like the crowning thing, right?
The
Because,
Apex?
yeah, I want to learn about Apex, yeah. Yeah, I want to learn about Kaladin. Yeah, I want to know what's going on with Dalinar's visions and if his sons are going to come around to seeing for what they are.
Yep.
But although I don't want to say that was secondary, but overall that was odium and the desolation. I really wanted to learn more, and that kept me hooked throughout the read.
All right.
Feel free to jump in whenever as well, Spencer. I told Spencer earlier that I lied to you in an episode that I don't think he'd heard about Yasna being pregnant.
Yeah, and he got my goat. I was like,
Yeah.
wait, when, how, who?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Capsule.
And then and then he had a Capocraphus grin on his face, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I got you.
I told him it was interesting because I think Yasna is like the least romantic character in the entire series.
Yeah, she's so mechanical
Yes.
in everything she does.
I think we don't actually get the nuance of how well she's put together, especially in the Way of Kings, but we get it, I think, a little bit later where Shallan, not regularly, but will from time to time remind us how well put together Yasna is. And that element of who she is as a woman in the Alethi court, sister to the king, is, I think, just a really, it's a very nuanced thing that I think Sanderson did really well, but also it didn't get enough play, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's another thing I would say is there is nuance to these characters where, it's Yasna right now, and just let's keep going with her, where she's this very abrasive, or at least can be perceived as abrasive, kind of mechanical, dogmatic woman, but she does feel bad for pushing Yasna to suicide. I mean, pushing Shallan to suicide, or in her mind. Obviously, now we know that it wasn't suicide, but she does feel bad because she's taken a liking to Shallan in whatever way Yasna takes likings to people.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't detest you. Do you like me? I said what I said.
Yeah.
Well, that's better than most
Exactly.
people get, especially
Yeah.
Amaram. Glue.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Slava, why don't you give us a quick rundown of your favorite characters and least favorite characters from the Way of Kings?
I definitely like Shallan. This is the second female character in the Sanderson world that I've identified with. And Ciri was in the Warbreaker, and it's just her reaction to things, how she processed things in her world. And obviously, I was never carted off to marry a god king or queen. But in that immense situation, just the way she reacted, I could identify with. And I think I said that to Jonathan in text or whatever, we were just talking about it. I reacted like that to things when I was a kid. I had those similar reactions. And they're not gender-specific reactions. They just happen to be given to Ciri by Sanderson in this book. So I'm connected to this character. I really like Ciri. To the point where, a little side quest here, he's like, so what's going on? He's like kind of quizzing me on the book because it's my first read-through, and Jonathan's excited to hear my feedback. And I was talking like, oh, Ciri's doing this, and she's trying this, and it's getting weird with the priests. And he's like, what's going on with Ravina? And I was like, I don't know. She's hanging out with the guy, the Nightblood. And he's like, you didn't notice that she almost became a prostitute because she was destitute? And I was like, oh, yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
Because I was so enamored.
Totally glazed over it.
Yeah, totally glazed over that part.
Yeah.
So anyway, side quest over. For the same reasons, I'm attracted to the character Shallan, because in moments where she's not doubting herself, because normally that kind of character wouldn't really fly with me. I'd be like, okay, no, I get it. You doubt yourself, but I really like people who take action. Because I myself perceive myself as a guy who takes actions. So despite those moments where with Shallan, I was like, oh, come on, girl. The way she reacted to things, the way she used humor as a mask, the way she was, was sarcastic and witty. I use humor as a mask, and I find myself, and Jonathan can probably testify to this, I can be witty and sarcastic too when I try, right? So
Strawberry.
we'll get to that. So Shallan as a character really is attractive to me in the Way of Kings. I like Yasna too, I think for different reasons. As a complicated character, I want to see where it goes. Kaladin is just easy to like, and I don't mean to, but he's the guy, right? He's the main character. You get his POV a lot, and he's been through a lot, and he's trying to do the right things. and he's being set up for the hero. But I still like him, even though it's kind of like almost a cop out, right? But I still like him as a character.
Wow.
Dalinar,
Tell us how you
not
really
so
feel.
much.
Jeez.
Yeah, like Dalinar, not so much. As like even though he's a good guy, and I want to see where he goes, and Oathbringer is supposed to be a really good book and giving us a glimpse into Dalinar's life.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get to that book, I won't be just skimming it because oh gosh, it's Dalinar. But they're not as, this is the only word that's coming to mind to me, as attractive as Shallan as a character, right?
Magnetic, drawn to.
Yeah. Wit, I like Wit a lot. You'll notice a pattern. Sarcastic and witty.
Wait till
I
you
like
meet
Wit.
Lift.
I like Teft a lot. Like these are like the characters that if I had to choose like top 5 or whatever, these would be the guys, right? Obviously, you're gonna have to help me with the name Jonathan, but the guy who sends Tien into war, the new Lord of
Rashon.
Yeah, everything about him like makes me want to punch him in the throat repeatedly.
Right.
And not just for the Tien thing, just the way he, like everything about him.
The way
even though Leon stole from him. I'm sorry.
It gets worse.
That's what you said too, Jonathan. So even though I know Liam stole from him, or Liren stole from him, and all that, whatever, not from him, from the other Lord even.
Right.
In the little bit we get of him, he's very punchable for me. So I don't like him already. Amaram found him to be a garbage person too. Right?
Yep.
I don't like the king at all. The king I even hate worse than Amaram.
I
think.
Alucard.
And I was right. I was freaking right. He did cut the saddle because he's a little petulant little child. He did cut the saddle to get attention, and I called it like that wasn't even me, cheating. I just called it. Like I knew because there's sometimes I did cheat and found stuff out, and Jonathan was mad about me, but I knew he did it. And now looking back on the episodes, Jonathan kept trying to steer me away from that because
100%.
Because I was right.
Yeah, Jonathan told me he was a little upset that you figured out so early on that Alucard cut the strap. So
It's I don't know what it was. It just like a gut feeling.
You're a psychopath. What?
Right.
Just like Alucard. What?
Psychopath say what? So I don't like the king. I find him childish, an unlikable character. Like even Sadius, he can be like Sadius. I'll mispronounce all their names throughout every episode. Even Sadius, you're a prick, Sadius.
That's kind.
All right, you know what? You're the protagonist. Like if you're just going to be very, a little bit more mechanical. If I describe the book, you're the antagonist.
Yep.
You're petty, and you're poor at planning. So you have to be conniving somehow in other ways, even though that doesn't even always come out as sneakily as he wants it to be.
Yeah.
So I kind of like Sadius because of the complexity there, right? But the king, I can't. I don't like snivelers, and I understand that we all have our moments, and not everybody's meant to be a warrior, and not everybody's going to be Dalinar or Kaladin. I get that, but if you're a gardener or a proctologist or a mailman, irrespective of your gender here too, because I want to make this point, I don't like snivelers, and I find the king a sniveler.
All three of those jobs you described deal with holes. So,
How observant.
You lonely, Slava? I need to talk.
Well, what did I say? A gardener, a mailman, and a proctologist. Yeah.
All deal with
things
holes.
into things.
Uh-huh.
Well, the third one removes things from things. Only two of them. And this is where we devolve.
This is quite the
insanity.
side quest we've already gotten ourselves into.
Oh my gosh.
Spencer, who are some of your characters that are favorites from The Way of Kings?
In The Way of Kings, talking with Slava a little bit ago, I really like Kaladin. I mean, right, he's one of the main characters, easy to like, but the things that he deals with just mentally, and I felt like I related to that. Maybe not in as dramatic fashion as Kaladin has had to, but yeah, I really like Kaladin. Really loved watching him and Syl bond and that friendship that develops between those two. And I really like Syl as a character too. She's curious nature about Syl and her wanting to learn and figure out who she is. That was super cool for me. I really enjoyed that dynamic of their relationship. Let's see. Yeah, Dalinar, I like the character overall. I don't know if he's a favorite of mine, but it's interesting to see his progression too. Definitely loved Wit. I do, also find or having sort of an attraction to like sarcasm or people who like to use sarcasm Yeah, witty, obviously witty, haha. Yeah, so Kaladin, wit, probably two of my favorites. Let's see here. Not as big on Shallan. I found her character kind of annoying. I know that's kind of one of your favorites there.
That's okay. No hate.
But and honestly, I guess that's really not fair for in the first book for me. I guess looking at it perspective of having read everything, I find her a little bit more annoying, more in the second book than the first. But
Specifically the second book.
yes.
Interesting.
Well, we get more of her POV and flashbacks in the second book, so we see a lot more of her. But I don't know. Personally, I just and I don't think it's anything to do.
I think she's the most annoying in the third book.
Okay, but
Because I
Oh,
think she's doing
goodness.
some more discovery in
Okay.
the second book.
But
Just
yeah,
my
I don't
thoughts.
know. I don't know. I guess I don't really have too much to hate on other than I just find her annoying. But
Yeah, and that's fair.
and it might be too just like the constant like kind of back and forth. Like, should I do this thing? Should I not?
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
Like,
that
and Kaladin deals with that too in some cases. But for me, I found it more annoying in Shallan, where it's like she just like, oh, I can't deal with this right now. I'm just gonna run away or like hide or something.
yeah.
Why do you think it's different in your dislike for Shallan doing that versus Kaladin?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I think I feel like I relate to Kaladin more just with his depression, like his
So you hate women.
that is not what I said. I feel like you're trying to put words in my mouth there, Jonathan. Obviously, Slavi will figure out more about Shallan in the next book, and why she is the way she is. But for me, like Kaladin, I feel like I just understood him as a person better. And just related to him more, and I feel like I've dealt with some of those same things, so it made sense why Kaladin sometimes takes a step backwards, whereas Shallan, I don't understand what exactly she's going through, so I find it, because I don't understand it, it doesn't make sense, and I find it kind of boring
Yeah.
or annoying.
I think if I'm going to be brutally honest, what attracts me to Shallan, as much as I find her annoying when she can't decide what the hell to do, is because I have a weird family relationship. My family situation is strange. So I have call it a half a family, a step family from my dad's first marriage. And I don't want this to be, a therapy session for Slava, because that's not the point of this podcast. But
Yeah.
because
Spencer's
of
actually a certified therapist in Russia.
in Russia. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'll
Yep.
just speak in Russian then. So I understand having contempt for some of your family members. And I think if you murder your dad, it's more than just, he didn't hug me enough or, buy me the princess dress I want when I was 7. There has to be contempt for that.
Yeah.
Something interesting I heard on, it was either Joe Rogan or something like that. And it was just a clip. And whoever the guy was, whether Rogan or somebody else, they had a psychiatrist on. And the psychiatrist was saying, the moment somebody rolls their eyes in couples therapy at anything during the session, you know that there's contempt there. And it's a far jump to murdering your spouse. But if you're a kid that murders your dad, and a dad who seemingly was kind of abusive, there's probably some weird things going on there. It probably wasn't sexual abuse, but it was some kind of emotional and maybe physical abuse, to the point where she either killed him or saw an opportunity where she didn't get involved and he died because of her actions. Yeah, you have to have contempt for a person like that. So I can understand that.
Yeah.
For me, that is understandable. Maybe for you, where when Kaladin gets a little bit more morose at times, you can relate to that because you might have gotten that way in certain similar situations. For me, having that contempt for certain family members, I get that. Because of real reasons, not because, I don't know. We had a fight once when we were 7 and he stole my fire
He stole
truck.
my
That's
toy.
why-
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I don't like my cousin
Yeah.
Phil. No, it's because there was active douchebaggery. It wasn't just we're all people and we all sin or we all make mistakes, whatever language you want to use there. There was active douchebaggery, and it was hurtful, but it was also to the point where you cannot be around me. There needs to be a boundary set, and that might be. And I'll stop with this because I've kind of derailed the conversation. I digressed. I understand Shallan's. Maybe I understand Shallan or identify with her because of that. I definitely don't identify with the seesaw thing where shouldn't I? It drives me up the wall. But the other stuff, I do understand.
So on that, it's interesting that you guys bring up these female characters, and before the show started, we were talking a little bit about this as well. But there's actually a Reddit post today, and somebody asked, I'm curious to know the opinions of girls and women on here regarding Brandon Sanderson's writing of female characters. And then one of the top posts, the woman, she says, as a woman myself, I don't think he writes women very well, so much as he writes people really well. I don't have any specific complaints about any of his characters. Some authors struggle with humanizing their characters, but Sanderson isn't one of them. And then I like this version even better, where the person below her says, I think it's a combination of he writes people really well and he writes women really well. He writes women as people. So, speaking about these characters, like, what do you guys think about that compared to other authors you've read who have written female characters and you went, I've met a few females in my life. They don't seem as back and forth as this character in random book that you have read.
Yeah, right. So I was telling Spencer that I think he writes females well, but I'm not a woman. So if a woman says like, maybe not, but at least he gets the people part right, I'll believe her because I can only speak from my perspective as a man. But having read other female characters by other authors, these are not two-dimensional stereotypes, cookie-cutter
secretaries who get the old slap and tickle.
Yeah, so like the emotions that Shallan is feeling, like the back and forth, that could be done in a poor way where it's just like, well, that's just a silly woman being silly.
Yeah.
You could write a character like that, or you can give this woman some depth, and you can understand why she is going back and forth. At least you can empathize. Even like someone like me who'd be like, shut up and get on with it, I can at least empathize because I have enough background to why Shallan might be doing the things she's doing.
Yeah.
That's a great quote. Even if he doesn't write women well, fine. But he does write people well, and women are people. Spoiler alert. So when you're reading this stuff, you're like, oh, okay, I get Shallan. She's not a two-dimensional ninny. She's a young woman who is processing a crap ton of stuff and finds herself as a timid person, as an unsure person. She finds herself in situations where she's forced to do things, and when she does do them, she's able to achieve these feats. Finding Yasna and actually stealing the Soulcaster, and then figuring out that it's fake, and then having the balls to go back to Yasna and be like, yeah, I know what you did, and I still want to be your ward, and I'll protect your secrets. That's almost a veiled threat. At least in some cases, that could be seen as a veiled threat.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, Spencer. You should answer that question too.
Yeah. I haven't read, I like to read, but I haven't read a ton of fantasy outside of Sanderson. But in other works, yeah, I feel like you either get your silly kind of female trope character, or you get like the opposite end where it's just like this super badass military commander chick who like just wants to be in charge of everything because
has
like...
no flaws.
Exactly.
Never went through problems. Always has her crap together. You're like,
yep.
That's not a real person.
That's not. Yeah, exactly. So, like you said, it's very cool to watch how Sanderson writes his characters and how each character has their own set of problems, and honestly, the further on you get, you'll see more of that. And I like how he writes Navani in later books, watching them, in their own struggles, and even to be able to relate to them as people. I've never been able to do that with other women characters, and I feel like I can do that in certain areas with Sanderson's characters. Like you talked about Ciri from Warbreaker a little bit. I related to Vivenna a little bit, just on how she was kind of set up to be this princess character to marry the God King, and then all of a sudden she now finds that's not what she's doing. She's found herself in this completely different situation.
Yeah.
She almost like didn't know what to do, and like her identity was, she was really questioning her identity and who she really was. And
absolutely,
I related to that on a little bit. Felt like I was set up to be something my whole life, and then after college, I was like, oh, this isn't actually me, and now I'm questioning like who I am a little bit. And so but like to be able to relate to that from a female character, I've never been able to do that with any other female character by another author. So
yeah, it's fun. Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree with you on that. And something interesting that like popped into my head as you were talking, I think a lot of people have gone through what Vivina and you have gone through. Even me, like I'll share a recent example. In between all the jobs I said I've done, before we started recording, I said I've done everything from running a pizza shop to construction to working in marketing. But for a chunk of my life, like 8 years of my life, I was in seminary, and I had the academic bug, and I had a plan, and I had what I thought was, what people in evangelical circles call the calling, and now that's become cliche and worthless word. But I felt like it was a calling, a sort of calling. I wanted to be in Christian academia, and I was being set up to be in Christian academia. I was working towards it, and all of a sudden, things kind of fell apart, and I found myself doing social media management and social media digital strategy for an organization, and finding myself excelling at it far more than the academic thing. Like, I can still build you a curricula or 10, and it'll be good. Like, just give me the data, I'll boil it down, and I'll be able to make a cohesive curriculum for almost any topic. And that kind of translates into the marketing part of it too. But for a bit there, I was thinking to myself, well, crap, I not only felt a calling to it, I've dedicated 8 years of my life to this training and preparing, and now I'm doing this thing. But because in my childhood, my mom was very impulsive, and we would move states sometimes just because reasons. I learned early on to react to those kind of things, react to them better. I don't want to say that, but just react to them and just change course, right?
Adaptability.
Really quickly. So when I was in a new high school, well, I'm in a new high school, and this has happened 17 times now. So I'm in a new state, I'm in a new city, I'm making new friends. So I'm in a new career. And because I've had so many careers, that was easy. Even though I empathized and understood why Vivina was having an existential crisis, I wasn't like, oh, this is why I'm attracted to Vivina. No, I'm attracted to Siri because she was pretty much betrayed by her dad. Like, that was a huge betrayal. And I have had serious betrayals by father figures. Not my dad died when I was 9, so I know nothing about him except from a faint memory here and there. But I've had people take up the helm or attempt to play father figures in my life. And for some of them, I still have that contempt because they did such an asinine job at that, such a poor job at that. And they, not because they were ill-equipped, but they actually treated me actively like garbage. So that was the thing, like, oh, they didn't know any better. No, they knew better, and they still treated me like shit. And so because of that, I think I identified with, maybe even subconsciously, that was where I identified with Siri, because I'm like, I get it. I get how she feels, and I also like jokes, and, I deal with stuff with humor and silliness. So
Classic.
Yeah.
What, you're going to change direction here a little bit. What was your favorite, well, not your top favorite quote, but like what were some of your favorite quotes? And I can help you find them if you have a rough idea of what they are from The Way of Kings. Now, I think this is going to be harder for Spencer because you and I have both read the whole Cosmere. And there are some books that quotes fall in that you're like, wait, wasn't that the other book? And it's like, nope, that was not Way of Kings. I know, this is a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Let me start us off. There's a quote from our boy Wit, right? And he is talking to Sadeas. I point out truths when I see them, bright Lord Sadeas. Each man has his place. Mine is to make insults, and yours is to be in sluts. Just
in sluts?
In sluts.
Yes.
In sluts.
In sluts.
Not insulted.
In sluts. Did you even read the book? What are you doing here?
Your back this train up. Yours is to be in sluts?
Yeah, he's saying that Sadeas sleeps with whores.
All right. I heard that completely different because audiobooks. I was listening to this in audiobook. I did not hear in sluts. I thought he said insulted. I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of a cool little retort.
In sluts.
Yeah.
Because, insult, INSULT.
I'm tracking.
And then insults, or insults and in sluts. I know English isn't your first language, so,
it is
just
not,
here to help you out. What does it sound like in Russian?
Composition. I couldn't even begin. Like, I had to think about it because I don't speak Russian that well.
Well, don't tell us that. We believe that you're bilingual.
I am. Yes, I am technically, but I've lost so much of my Russian that it's almost embarrassing to even.
So you slowed down?
Yeah. Well played. Yes, I'm not Russian anymore.
All right, favorite quotes, boys.
Symbol.
What do you got for me?
What do you got, Spence? What do you think?
Oh my goodness. See, here's the problem. Like Jonathan said, I'm not going to remember from which book this is, so I don't want to give anything away.
Well, Slava already ruins
I have
things.
moments. I have moments that I like. Quotes are hard for me.
Yeah, same.
Okay,
'cause
fine.
it's
Moments.
like the-
Favorite moments. Favorite moments. We'll change it.
One that jumps out, and I do want to get Spencer some airtime here. I'll when Syl comes to the chasm and brings Kaladin the poisonous plant because he likes it. I thought that was kind of like a cute moment. Like she's like, look, don't die. Here's a poisonous plant, not knowing it's a poisonous plant. And he's like, dude, what the hell? Are you telling me to poison myself instead of throwing myself off a chasm? And I thought that was a good. Here's a silly word for it, but a good like team building thing. Like it's where they kind of bonded. I know it's silly. I can't think of the right word, but it was a bond between them when that happened because Kaladin was like, "Oh, okay," and he starts laughing. Kind of gets what she's doing. If I was going to pick top 5 events that I really liked in the book, that would be one of them for sure.
Nice.
That'll be a team building event that I'll bring to Gabe for us to use on Tuesday night, Spencer.
Yeah.
Who can bring poisonous plants to your friends? Let's go.
To your suicidal friends.
Right.
This is going to go over real well.
Yeah, sure he would appreciate that. Let's see, a favorite moment from The Way of Kings. Oh my goodness. So, again, I can't remember if this is from Way of Kings or Words of Radiance, but it's essentially where Wit is insulting Sadeas, but I think Renarin is there. And obviously Wit keeps making fun of Sadeas, but then Wit turns his attention to Renarin, and Dalinar is like, oh no, Renarin's gonna get made to be, look like a fool. But then he's like, hey, Renarin, Wit's like, again, and I can't remember the exact quote, so I know I'm gonna get this wrong, but essentially Wit is like, Renarin, can you not say anything stupid? And Renarin just kind of like looks at him for a moment and is like, essentially says not anything stupid. Like he repeats what Wit said. Yep. And then Wit was actually really impressed with that.
Yep. That's another favorite of mine, yeah.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that one up. That's a really cool one.
Yep. So I was like, all right, that was really cool. And it just, again, made Sadeas look like more the fool in that, in that little interaction there. So that was a really fun interaction there that I enjoyed.
Well, I have a question. We kind of went in a few different side quests and talked about the Way of Kings as a whole, and maybe in parts, and then we even went to Warbreaker's world. So, in keeping up in that world hopping, like what are some, now that you read all of it, and I think this question will be worded in such a way where nobody's going to spoil anything for me. But what are some unanswered questions or mysteries that now that you've read everything, there's some still lingering mysteries about the Cosmere that just kind of are still there. You're like, man, I really want to know X about Hoyd or X about Shallan or anything. Like that. I'm just throwing out characters I know. Forget characters. It could be a magic system.
Yeah, I am still very curious about Hoyd. There's obviously a lot more. Yeah, there's more, obviously, that you'll learn once you continue reading the Cosmere, but I still feel like there's so many unanswered questions with him. For me, I'm curious about who he is, what his motivations are, where he's from, all of that good stuff. So he's definitely a character that I am really hoping to learn more about as time goes. More books are written, stories and stuff are told, but and then there's still a lot more about the Recreants and the Desolations that we still don't know why they happened. I mean, we get a few answers in the upcoming books, but I am just finishing my second read through of Rhythm of War, which is the 4th book, and there's questions that are brought up. There are questions that are brought up there where you're just like, oh wow, yeah, that is not a question that's been answered yet, and I still want to know. And so, yeah, that's, again, one of those things where Sanderson, like, yeah, it's this long, drawn-out story, but yet he gives you bits and pieces where it keeps you hooked. So, yeah, I definitely want to learn more about the Desolations, the Recreants, and, like, what was really going on 4,500 years before where we're at in the current story.
Right.
So, Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong, but Dragonsteel, the series that Sanderson wants to write, is going to be Hoyd-centric, right?
Yes, I believe Hoyd is going to be the main character in the Dragonsteel series, which I think he plans on writing that series after Stormlight 10. So, and then Mistborn Era 3. So
we're going to be 65 or 70 by the time that we get these books.
Say, we're going to be pensioners,
Yep.
Freaking, okay.
So,
well.
But yeah, those are a couple things right now that I'm still curious about, at least with the Stormlight series.
So,
okay. That's a good answer. I like that. Because it just tells me that there's so much to build out for Sanderson. Because if by book 4 you know very little about Hoyd, or little enough to give me the answer you just gave me, I think that's kind of cool. That means, for me, it's cool. It means that Sanderson is building something bigger than I even thought or imagined.
So let's take a moment from the interludes, right, where these 3 guys are chasing after Hoyd. We hadn't met Hoyd yet. We've met Wit, but we hadn't met Hoyd. And Spencer, I don't remember us getting a follow-up to that, really. Right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the other 3 books, like, and the 2 novellas, I don't remember any more information in terms of why people are chasing down Hoyd. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't recall any other interludes or places in the story why those 3 guys are chasing him down. Yeah, I don't recall anything else. And there's obviously a lot of interludes across the 4 books, and so far, I can't recall anything about extra on that. So
yeah, and it's never part of the main story either. It's always just like a side thing. Another thing that we don't, and I'm gonna look to Spencer on this one too. We don't get a very clear picture about what the heralds are doing. We get an understanding of who they are. We meet 2 of them per book. I gave Slava that information, but we don't really get the full picture of what they're up to now / what they've been up to. So that's like definitely a big question as well in the course of 4 books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. That we don't really know what the heralds are up to. We do learn. Let's see. Yeah, we do learn some more in the 4th book about at least a couple of them. But yeah, again, their motivations are still kind of unknown. I believe it's at the end of The Way of Kings where Taln shows up.
Yep.
But he's basically completely insane. Like, he's mad. Like, he's ranting and raving, and he's just repeating words that he used to say in the Old Desolations.
Yeah, Wit's sitting there at the door of Kholinar and asking the guards, like, what do men value most? Or how did he say it?
Yeah, what do men value most?
Mm-hmm.
Was that
like
it?
art or science or whatever, and then it's timeliness.
Mm-hmm.
And
then he says,
late.
You're late, old friend. I think he says old friend in there.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
I
mean, it sounds like something Wit would say, but...
Yeah, but it's just curious because, if Wit is... Well, here's a little tidbit for Slava. Wit is really old.
Okay.
He's super old.
That makes sense. If he's Hoyd and he's a world hopper and there's people chasing him, he can't be a 22-year-old. It just makes sense that he's probably older than what we perceive him to be, and he's done some stuff.
He's done some stuff. That's funny.
Spencer, can you try and give us a brief synopsis of Mistborn Era 1?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, before you do that, Spence, here's what a Wit said. What is it we value, Wit whispered? Innovation, originality, novelty, but most importantly, timeliness. I fear you may be too late, my confused, unfortunate friend.
Okay.
And then it ends.
Yep.
Well, you can't see that, but then it ends.
Yeah.
Anyways.
All right, yeah. It's
So Mistborn Era 1, Mistborn Era 2, just like quick synopses to wet Slava's whistle.
All right, so The Final Empire is the name of the first Mistborn book. Essentially, it's kind of a dystopian type world, very kind of like dark and just a dark setting, the world itself. The landscape and the geography is definitely different. I'm not sure how much to give away on that.
But you can kind of describe it's almost Victorian era a little bit.
Yeah, Victorian area, but also like
houses.
dystopian. Yeah, just the geography setting. But yeah, and then essentially
and it's a heist.
It is a heist story set in a world where I think even Brandon describes this when he's talking about Mistborn, but like, what if when he went to write Mistborn, like, what if the bad guy won? And now you're in that world, and what does that look like? And now this bad guy essentially has been reigning for 1,000 years, and this heist story starts taking shape. The magic system is, I find the magic system on this planet to be my favorite, even above Stormlight and Surges. Allomancy is the one that you meet in the Final Empire, the magic. Just very fascinating. Well, I don't want to say too much. I think it'll give it away, but with certain aspects of the story. But I'm just a very unique magic system to me. And maybe it's because it's not as in-depth or maybe not as complicated as Surges.
It feels simpler a little bit.
It does feel a little bit simpler, so maybe that's why I like it more. But yeah, it's one of my favorites, and it's really cool to see how the characters learn what the magic is and how to use it. So that's a synopsis of the first book, and then the series obviously expands upon that. Era 2 of Mistborn takes place 300 years after the events of the first era. And so some of the characters from the first book have passed like into legend. Some of them are worshipped, some of them are not. But yeah, but they're totally new characters set in like a 19 or maybe like a late 1800s, early 1900s industrial revolution kind of a setting. So yeah, quite a bit different from Era 1, and the tech you start seeing tech to be developed based off of the magic, but also like from like what we know is like real world tech. So it's just very cool to see how he writes fantasy, yet in like a industrial revolution type setting.
It's also a bit Western.
Yeah, there's definitely elements of a Western in there for sure.
I think we touched upon this, Jonathan, in one of our episodes, or maybe side quests, or even just conversations off the air, where this is not your Sanderson specifically. This is not your typical fantasy, Middle Earth or medieval times, dragons and knights and witches and kind of your typical. This is very different, but it's intricate. But it's written in a way where you're hooked. You're like, oh wow, this is intriguing. What's going on here? This thing is Chasm Fiend, or the colors thing and Warbreaker. You're like, oh well, that's kind of out of left field, but okay, I'm tracking. I want to know more. So that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably get to it after Stormlight if I get to it. We'll see. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? But
in book 2 of the Stormlight Archives, you get secret encounters with Vasher and Nightblood.
I like it already. Nightblood's a favorite character of mine.
I love Nightblood.
Wow, I felt like that was kind of a spoiler there, Jonathan.
We discussed it before.
Oh,
I told it to him. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm trying to give Slava I'm trying to meet him where he's at with how he wants to engage with stories, where if I don't give him these things, he'll go and search things out that I don't want him to know.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to feed the beast here.
So here's the thing, Spencer. Just for your situational awareness. The way I like to read this kind of stuff is I'm totally on track with Jonathan's plan for this, and I'll honor it. Fine, no spoilers. This is first reaction type of stuff as I go. But there's certain things that I need to know to enjoy it because it's going to just gnaw at my mind. So certain immediate context definitions that in Jonathan's minds might be spoilers, but for me, it is not spoiling anything. It's only giving me this immediate, kind of some meat on the bone for the immediate context. And I'm like, I get it. And then fine, don't tell me the spoiler. Just give me this, and then I'll move forward. So that kind of stuff, that particular stuff, the Vasher and Nightblood in book 2, that's more just to wet my whistle and him being a good friend.
Yeah.
Give me a little morsel. I'm trying to think of the example.
While you're thinking,
I think I researched Hoyt because when ODM comes, sorry, not sorry, I'm going to look up who ODM is.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff Jonathan had to deal with.
Yeah. So
I need to go for it. No, go for it.
So when I first started reading the Cosmere, I had no idea of the larger Cosmere whole. So when I first started reading Mistborn, that is. And yeah, so I had no idea what was going on kind of in the behind the scenes. Some of these larger kind of like overarching storylines that are almost like being told behind the scenes of like what's going on in the Cosmere. So like, Odium comes, and like I don't know who Odium is, but I didn't really search it out. I just kind of like, I'll figure it out. But then like I read through everything, and then people are telling me, oh yeah, there's this, or like I read stuff online, like find out, oh, there's actually this larger kind of narrative that's going on behind the scenes, and like I had no idea. So like even though I had read everything, I still really didn't know what Sanderson was doing kind of behind the scenes with everything. So I did look up a lot of stuff that I like didn't know even the first time. So like, but then like on my rereads, then it's like you really start to notice stuff that you didn't notice the first time. Like, oh, well now I understand why, these characters are doing that thing, or why they said this. Yeah, so for me, I looked up a lot of stuff too. Even though I'd already read everything, I just didn't really know what was going on. So, but yeah, having certain bits of information can be helpful for like immediate context. So I do understand that. I feel like,
and I did ruin one thing where I forgot what I was looking for, or who I was looking up was one of those things. But immediately above the blurb at the wiki at the top, it had the most important words a man can say. And so I knew that. And when Jonathan was like, so Slava, what do you think those words are? And I was like, I'll do better. And then there was this pause where he's like, did he get it? Or is he telling me he'll do better? And he's like, what? And I was like, no, I'll do better.
I don't.
Yeah.
Thoroughly annoyed. I was like, you cheated.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite quotes from the Stormlight archive. So
yeah,
one of my favorite quotes, and I actually have it on the wall over here because Spencer's at my house right now doing this recording, and it's a quote from Dalinar where it says, "If I must fall, I will rise each time a better man." It's just such a great quote. And then like even the intro question from Gavilar to Dalinar on the night of the feast, where he's like, tell my brother he must find the most important words a man can say. And it's like, I've never thought about that, but that's a really great question, and now I want to know what the most important words a man can say is. It reminds me of the Name of the Wind, where Elodin tells Kvothe that there's 7 words that can make any woman fall in love with you, and I'm like, well, why don't you tell me what those are? Because that could be useful. I realize this is a fantasy book, but
that
like
would be nice to know.
It's useful information. Let's find out if it's real. I get my life from philosophy from fantasy books. Don't at me in the comments.
Yeah, just because it's in a fantasy book doesn't mean it's not true.
That's the kind of spirit that I like to hear.
Now, there's a lot of quotable, and I can't think of them. Just your question a little bit ago, Jonathan, I can't think of any for the life of me. But as I was listening to the book, there was a couple of times where I was like, whoa, that's a good quote. One of them is from Navani, and I'm going to butcher it again, just like I butchered it in the previous episode. It has to do with tradition and doctrine. Dalinar's like, oh, I can't, you're my sister. She's like, I'm not your sister. I was your brother's wife. He's like, but, tradition says you are my sister. And she says, and I'm paraphrasing, even ad-libbing a little bit. She says, my dear Dalinar, there's a difference between doctrine, which is good and it should guide you, and tradition that is an addition to it. And you should be able to weigh those two. Now, that's a lot of me extrapolating what I think Navani was saying from just a sentence and a half, or maybe even half a sentence. But that's what I got from it. It's like, yeah, there are traditions and doctrines. There are some things that are set in stone. You can beat your head all day long, but you won't be able to crack this. This is an objective truth, or objectively good. And then there's traditions where, like, no, I get it why some people might not want you to marry your dead brother's wife. There might be reasons for a culture to come up with those rules, good, bad, or indifferent. And eventually those things become tradition. And that might be good, bad, or indifferent. But at the end of the day, it's your dead brother's wife. Like, it's okay. It's been like, whatever, 10 years. You can date your former sister-in-law. Nobody's going to die. It's not going to end the world. Yeah. So that was what Navani was saying, but the quote itself was just so good.
Devotaries say what they can't. Devotaries can say what they wish, but the arguments do not forbid our union. Tradition is not the same as doctrine, and I will not hold myself back for fear of offending.
Yeah, see, so I extrapolated a whole crap ton from just that
Yeah.
in my head, just from that quote, but I found that really, really powerful quote.
Agreed. And this is one of the things I love about fantasy novels in general, is as these authors get going, the machine in their head that's writing these characters and these moments of dialogue, you're like, oh shoot, that's like a really good line. Like anytime I go for a run, which is not very often these days, but like has been, I literally just in the middle of my run when I'm like, I want to give up, I just go, well, I'm bridge leader. It's my privilege to run at the front. Just that's the mantra. That's what we got.
Yeah, and what I find interesting too is all three of us kind of attached to different characters and different points, whatever, philosophies, things that have been like pulled out. Like for me to extrapolate what I just did from Navani's little thing, that's very unique to me. And I could even go into the story of why. Because of my family history and just my personal history, I can relate to what Navani's saying. Doctrine versus tradition. That's interesting in and of itself, but also speaks to Sanderson's, what we said, pace and scope of writing before we started recording. That it's immense. It's a good pace. It keeps you interested, but there's such a scope to it too, where not only the characters aren't two-dimensional, but even the world they live in is more palpable, if I may use that word, than a lot of other stories. That's not for lack of a better term, let's call it that. That's
I think that makes sense. I also find it, the tradition versus doctrine. Yeah, I didn't relate to Navani too much on that, even though I did. Yeah, I grew up in a very conservative type background, and tradition was very important, and doctrine. As I've come out of that and gotten a little bit older and just kind of look back, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of things that we ascribed to that just is not as important as they sometimes make it out to be. And it just kind of, it I don't know if it, maybe it ruined some relationships that could have been better just with family. Yeah, tradition can be a good thing, but it can also be a hindrance.
Absolutely.
So currently, Slava has us reading a dystopian. We're going to do a quick side quest to catch Spencer up on the behind the scenes here, because it's going to be weeks before this comes out. Slava's got me reading this dystopian Russian book about aliens or something. I don't know, Slava, you want to give like a
sci-fi? It's more sci-fi than dystopian, but...
And it was written in Russian originally?
It was written in Russian. It was written in the height of the Soviet Union, which is maybe not the height. The height, in my opinion, and I'm not a historian, but the Soviet Union during the Cold War and when it was the Soviet Union, like early 50s into mid 70s, that's, when it sort of started, again, just my amateur historian cap on here, that's when it just started going downhill. Like things started falling apart to get us to the 90, 91 where it did fall apart. So anyway, it was written in 74, 76. It was written by two brothers, and it's considered by sci-fi enthusiasts as one of the best sci-fi books. Like if they're going to pick top 50, this would make it. And it's about 7 zones in the world. And obviously the Soviet Union's still around. But because of these 7 zones, the world's more unified. And these 7 zones are where aliens have visited. So aliens have visited the Earth. There's 6 or 7 zones. And where they visited, they've wreaked havoc. Their space machines, space vessels, whatever happened, they just wreaked havoc in these zones. And these zones are protected by the government. So the characters we meet in this book, they're either black marketeers who go into the zones to try to pick up alien trinkets, or government workers who study the zones. That's the setup for the story. Sorry, Jonathan. Now you may speak now.
You may speak now. Wow, it sounds like Soviet Russia.
I've been dominating this podcast, which is very unusual. Usually, Jonathan kind of guides the conversation, and I kind of tag along, and here I am just yammering on.
Spencer makes you feel comfortable. Is Spencer your emotional support friend?
Emotional support human, yes. Spencer's functioning as that right now.
Sweet, I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah. I bring one more Cosmerian in, and Slava's just geeking out over here. Tell me all the secrets. Spencer, tell me all the secrets. I had a
Patience.
point. I forgot what they were, but
Slava's making you read dystopian novels.
yeah,
Catching Spencer up on behind the scenes.
yeah. I think I deviated too quickly. That should have been an end piece. I did want to ask another question about the Cosmere, and then we can wrap up here. The investiture. So Slava knows a little bit about investiture, but not a ton, because he's read Warbreaker, he's read Way of Kings, and he can see that investiture is an element or like a piece of the way that these planets work. But how do we? How do you ask this question? How do you describe that? That's not a good way to. And I haven't given you guys enough information to like help me with this question, so I'm just like floundering over here. Spencer, investiture in the Cosmere and things of the planets, and like how do you? I don't have a question here. That's it. That's the episode.
Great question, Jonathan. Let me elaborate here if I can. Yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah.
Spencer, do you have any questions for Slava?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one thing I wanted to ask is like, what do you? I guess Jonathan kind of teased this out a little bit already, but I was curious, like, what you think of Wit, just in general. Like, is there anything about him that you're just kind of like, I don't know about this guy, or like, I don't know. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah. Well, I like him because he's witty and he's funny. So that out of the way, and we already mentioned that. I was pleasantly surprised that he is Hoyd, because that interlude when Hoyd is introduced and there's three guys chasing him,
Mm-hmm.
I was badgering Jonathan a little bit. What is going on here? Like, I want to know more. And so that's where I looked up Hoyd, and that's when I got the fact that he's a world hopper. So this is the three times I kind of went outside of the scope of the project just because I really needed some context.
Yeah.
And I did look up who Hoyd was, and the only thing I took out of that thing is, I found out the words, the most important words a man can say when I was looking Gavilar up. That's how I learned that. So when I looked up Hoyd, all I learned was he's a world hopper, and I came back to the next episode with that information, and that's what intrigued me. Like, so what is he doing? So to answer your question, Spencer, like what's intriguing to me about Hoyd is what is he doing world hopping? Like, what is this? What is his motivation? What's he up to during these hops? And he's obviously done something that he has three people looking for him. Now, they might not want to rough him up or make him answer for anything, but nonetheless, they're looking for him. So whatever he's up to is intriguing. And as we go farther into the Way of Kings towards the end, like, it seems like he's placed himself close to the king. He's helped Dalinar out. He's placed a person in Kaladin's bridge, the world singer, and he's gotten himself. Jonathan tried to dissuade me from this. I think it's subterfuge. And he put himself close to Kaladin in the woods, as Kaladin is, walking it off, like walking the stormlight off. And so then he talks to Talon and says, hey, you're late, my confused, crazy friend.
Yeah.
So he's up to something. So I believe, Slava's assumption here, I believe the world hopping, he's doing something on these worlds. And here on Roshar, it seems to be he's setting something up. That something is very vague and nebulous, I know, but it's in a reaction to the desolation. He's talking to the people, and he's getting close to people who are going to be, we figured it out, Knights Radiant, right? He's kind of next to the people who the voice in the visions is building, the Knights Radiant again, and he's put himself next to these people. And he seems to be, at least in one instance, well, two, with Kaladin and with Dalinar, helping them, even if it's just throwing them a little scraps, like with Dalinar, in regards to Sadius. So I want to know what he's up to, and if he's a friend or foe. Overall, I think he's a great character, but what I want to know about him are those two things. What he's up to, and is he friendly to the cause, or is he being, wit?
Yeah. Yeah, there was, and again, I don't remember if this is in the second book or not, but he does mention to Dalinar that...
Anshalon,
yeah, that he's not... Basically, if they get in his way, he's not afraid to do what is necessary to achieve his goals.
Okay.
So if that's in the second book, sorry for spoiling that.
No. But see, that's not even a spoiler. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think that
okay.
just like so he
Yeah.
does have goals.
Mhm.
That doesn't tell me his goals,
yeah.
right? That just tells me
Right. Yep.
that what I already know. Shallan comes to the Shattered Plains. That's kind of given.
Mm-hmm.
Kaladin, because he's now a captain, he's going to be part of this family.
Yep.
So him and Shallan are going to meet. That's probably going to have its own interesting dynamics. And Wit's coming back, right? Like I kind of figured he was going to come back to the king.
Mm-hmm.
And so him interacting with Dalinar and Shallan, that's kind of almost a given. And based on my assumptions here, I think you gave me a good morsel. That he's gonna,
Yeah.
They're going to be doing something that might mess with his plans.
Yep.
And he's like, "Shut up, people! Don't
Yeah.
stay in your lane."
Yeah. Essentially, I think Wit is he's not afraid to do what he deems necessary to achieve his goals, and if Dalinar gets in the way of that, Wit might try to take Dalinar. Well, I mean, see. He's not afraid to be enemies with Dalinar, I think, if
That makes sense.
If it comes to that.
Wit will continue to pursue his goals regardless of whether or not someone he's befriended gets in his way.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the one thing that I was really curious as to your thoughts on. I had another question earlier, and now it's slipping my mind. Yeah, I'm excited to keep up with this and see, it's always fun to watch someone on their first time reading through Sanderson's works. So I'm looking forward to experiencing your journey as this podcast continues.
Yeah, no, me too, man. I appreciate
That's
that.
what I told him. Everyone wants to go back to their first time reading the Cosmere.
Yeah, and even each reread has its own revelations, because once you experience the full Cosmere and then you go back and read the individual stories, you start to see things and you're like, oh wow, he really he foreshadowed this way ahead of time and you have no idea. So that's one of the things that I love about Sanderson, is just like the amount of foreshadowing that he does is just insane, and you have no idea until you do a reread. So
Very cool.
Spencer, was Lirin justified in taking the
Spheres.
was Lirin justified in taking the money from the Bright Lord of their town before Rashon showed up, because he had a verbal agreement with whatever her face's name is for Kaladin and her
Laurel?
to get... Was it Laurel? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the girl that Kaladin kind of had a crush on.
Yep.
Yeah, was Lirin justified in taking the chips, the coins?
Mm,
God, what are they called? Help me out here.
Spheres.
Thank you.
spheres.
I'm like, this is not... Oh, man. It's a Thursday.
I mean, a chip is the smallest
I know.
denomination.
Yeah, spheres.
Of
that was the
money,
word that I was
sorry.
looking for,
But
though.
yes.
But yeah. What do you think? What do you think, Spence?
Oh man, I don't know what I think on that. That's an interesting conundrum there. But I mean, it was a verbal agreement, right, by Lirin and the former Bright Lord. But then again, Lirin kind of manipulated his way into that verbal agreement. I believe we find that out at some point. So yeah, I don't know. Lirin, he thinks he's justified, and you could argue that because the Bright Lords treat their dark eyes horribly in some cases. You say Lirin was justified in doing that. He's trying to do a good thing, even though he might have went about it in a technically illegal fashion. Yeah, I don't know. If you're going by strict rules of the law, maybe it was illegal for Lirin to do, but I don't think it was morally. I don't think it was wrong.
Okay, Shallan.
Jonathan, he brings that up because Jonathan and I had a discussion on this, and at the end, what I said was, yeah, I'm not blaming Lirin. I'm not wagging my proverbial finger at him.
Yeah.
But he frickin' stole spheres. I don't care if it was a verbal
Yeah.
agreement or not. He stole them. And, that's
funny.
that's
Yeah.
it. I'm not even making a moral judgment, although I have an opinion about it. Just the facts, ma'am, right? Like from that TV show from the 70s or 80s. That's it. Like, he stole them. Again, for specific reasons and for reasons that are not so specific, which is, I sound like I'm an insane person here. I'm not making a moral judgment. I'm not, wagging that finger at Liren for doing it. But if somebody's asking me, did he steal those? I'm like, yeah, he stole those. Now, would you steal a piece of bread to feed your family? I would. There might have been a verbal agreement, and he might have known that Kaladin and what's-her-face are never going to get married, and, well, I never charge anybody for my surgeries. I just take, a couple of chickens and a piece of bread. He might be just going through a bunch of stuff in his head, and in his own head, he might be justified taking them. But what you call that is stealing.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation that Jonathan and I had. That's why he threw that question out, so I can continue ranting on how I think Liren is a thieving bastard.
So Slava said, he's going back and forth and he feels insane, and that's why he likes Shallan so much.
There you go. There it is.
And we'll just leave it at that.
It all comes out in the wash.
Oh my gosh. Oh man, I was going to say one more thing about Liren. Liren he did a number on his family. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can even tell from not knowing what you're referring to that he did, because he kind of seems to be. Here's what I said. I think he brings trouble on himself. He does things and says things, and even some of his beliefs, some of his worldview, and how he then acts upon certain things. That brings him trouble more than anything. And you kind of get this thing. Oh, he's so noble. He's a doctor. He's a surgeon. And he even operates on people that hate him, and he's trying to clear Kaladin of any
guilt.
What's the word I'm looking for? It's not racism, not classism, but discriminatory kind of posture. What is that? There's a word for it.
Discrimination.
Yeah, but there's another word for it.
Okay.
When you have ill feelings towards a group of people, but it's not racism because that has a particular definition. When you're
bigots.
Yeah, certain bigotries, man. Let's go with that. When he's trying to kind of maybe clear Kaladin's head of what he perceives as might be bigotry, and he's like, well, no, they might be a little kooky, they might be a little crazy, but they're still people. We still have to, whatever, heal them and, sew them up, and they're still human beings. So even doing that, which is a noble thing, to teach your kid not to be a bigot, even when you see people acting badly, you can't ascribe that to all the people in the town if just some are acting badly. But even in that, even in those actions, yeah. But I was looking for a different word that it has to do with how you react to stereotypes. That's why I was thinking about racism and bigotry, but it's not those words. Anyway, like even in trying to instill some good characteristics into Kaladin. Just the way he goes about it, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's duplicitous. That's too strong a word.
Brainwashing.
Because I think he believes what he says, but even the way he 100%. Does that, it kind of backfires on him, right? Like, am I making sense? Because I'm not in my head, but I have words that are coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
All right, let's transition here. Looks like Spencer has another question for you.
All right, so Slava, can you tell me like your assumptions so far of like how the Cosmere ties together as a whole, or like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have very little thoughts, only because I only read 2 books, and only in the second book did we get a better understanding of the connections between the planets and the Cosmere. So there's the World Hoppers who are hopping the worlds to find Hoyd, who is hopping worlds. Whatever his plans, noble or ill-noble, he's causing trouble. He's getting people interested in his little escapades. So is there war among the planets? I don't think so, because there's only a few people that can world hop, and those people seem to be moving the chess pieces on each particular planet. And that's all I can say, because I can't. That's why I want those little tidbits, those little context clues, because then I'm better poised to make an assumption. By itself right now, the world hoppers, I can maybe make an assumption on them, and that is that they're running around causing trouble or chasing a troublemaker. But how the world is connected, I haven't read enough to even know.
Yeah.
Unless I'm missing something, and then tell me that, reveal that to me, and then I can make an assumption based on that. But if I'm missing that connection between the worlds, unless I know that, I can't make a definitive assumption.
So you know Vasher, right? Warbreaker?
Yeah. Yep.
You're familiar with Vasher. You remember his personality type. So he's on Roshar now. You'll meet him. He's secretly hidden. You won't notice it right away, but he's there, right? Do you think he's a world hopper?
Well, yeah, because it was a different planet that he was on when we were at Warbreaker.
Okay. And you said a minute ago that you believe the world hoppers are trying to control the chess pieces of different planets, right?
Well, at least Hoyt is, and
So not
a person
all
like
world
Vasher was that?
So not all world hoppers are trying to control the chess pieces?
No, some are maybe responding to the movement of those chess pieces. And I think Vasher might be the type of guy who might be responding to something instead of actively trying to manipulate a planet.
Okay. I was going to try and corner you
Okay.
because Vasher's just like, I mean, he tells it to Vivina. He's like, I'm a grumpy old asshole, but I always tell the truth, or whatever he says, you know?
Yeah, even when I lie.
And so he's
He
the type
doesn't
of
say
person
that.
who's like, he just wants to be left alone, but he's a world hopper.
So is it like Roshar
technicality.
his Florida? He's just retiring to Roshar?
I don't know if Roshar is the planet you want to go to
You know,
to
the high
retire.
storms. Oh, yeah. Well, Florida has hurricanes. Roshar has high storms.
There you go.
There you go.
I mean, you're not wrong. And on either account, I mean, I think technically Vasher kind of does go to Roshar as a Florida type getaway, even though he's a curmudgeon.
Yeah.
I
I'm
don't
so excited
know.
to see the havoc Nightblood's going to cause on Roshar. Even if
Yeah.
it's just a little havoc. If it's just you know,
You have
Whatever.
no idea.
I still have no idea, and we've read the whole Cosmere.
If I got to pick a book that he was going to write next after Stormlight 5, it would be Nightblood, Warbreaker 2.
Yep. Yeah, I'd love to see what goes on after the events of the
It'd
first
be so
one.
much fun.
Mm-hmm.
Or like a
Yeah.
prelude to Warbreaker, some sort of book series before that.
yeah.
Yeah, like what is it, the 5 or whatever?
5 scholars.
5 scholars. What are they?
Arsteel, Yeasteel, Vasher, whatever his first name was.
I thought Vasher was Yestiel.
No, Arsteel and Yeasteel, he talks about at the end of Warbreaker that they're still around, and it's kind of like a cliffhanger that he's going to go deal with them. And then, what was the name of the woman he was in love with?
Shalash?
No, that's a herald from
That's a-
Stormlight.
But it was something with a SH in it. That's kind of vague. But
Yeah. And then Denth, right? Denth was one of the, wasn't he?
Yeah.
yep.
And it was Denth's sister, whoever it was.
That's right.
Yeah. But I'd be curious as to know like their origin story.
Well, I figured out that word that I was looking for. It's called prejudice.
That actually makes sense.
Yeah. So he wanted to curb Kaladin's prejudice against the townfolk. That's what I was trying to say. My
Perfect.
excuse is always English is my second language. Even though I speak without an accent, English is my second language because I learned it later in life. And I've studied French, I've studied Spanish, and I've studied ancient Greek and ancient Hebrew. Pretty proficient for a while there in seminary in ancient Greek, and pretty proficient for a while there of French back in my high school years. So my brain sometimes, when it tries to create a sentence, it does not do well with English. It thinks like, well, how would the French say it? And then it comes out in English like that, but that's not how English speakers say these things. Or I have a
Shashara.
hard time pronouncing words because I've learned how to pronounce things in Hebrew. Like ancient Hebrew has a little bit of a different pronunciation as modern Hebrew. Koine Greek, which is the New Testament written in Koine Greek, it's pronounced a little bit than modern Greek. French has its own beast of a pronunciation rules. And then English, and then Russian. And so sometimes when I try to pronounce a word, it comes out all not the way it's supposed to.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
English is my only language, and sometimes I still don't get it right. So
Well,
it's
but
fine.
English is just a beast of fun itself. So,
On that note, I saw a comedy bit or like a meme where the guy's like, if you ever can't remember a word, just go, oh, I can't remember what it is in English. And then people will assume you're bilingual.
there you go.
I sent it to my girlfriend who's Latina, and she's like, but I do that. And I was like, right, and now I'm going to do it because then people will think that I'm also bilingual. Oh, speaking of my girlfriend, and then we can end this plane. I was going to say this earlier, and I forgot to, when we were talking about Lyran and stealing the spheres. When I went to Vegas for my trade show recently, I told her if I die in the plane crash, I need her to come steal my Xbox and then text Slava that you took the Xbox, he'll understand what you mean. Because in part of
Yeah.
the discussion we had about
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
the spheres, he made an example like, well, if you take the Xbox after I die. And I
Well,
was like,
this is why
that's fine.
elaborate, but this is why elaborate and at the same time very stretched analogy for why I think Lyran is a thieving bastard. I'm kidding. Why I think Lyran did steal the spheres. It was actually, you could call it stealing. I was like, so let's say you and I are friends, Jonathan, and you have a sister, and we're all friends, and I have some sort of relationship with your sister that could be called courting, and you get hit by a bus. And the only thing I ever wanted of yours was your Xbox, and now that you're dead, and I'm kind of sort of dating your sister, I'm just going to take your Xbox without any permission, without anything. Now, is that really bad? No, because we're all friends, we're family. And I'm even dating your sister now, and as she's mourning for you, I'm there for moral support. But it would still be not my Xbox. And I know I'm being a bit absolutist there, but I'm just trying to prove a point. I'm like, it's still not my Xbox. It's still not his spheres. So anyway, I'm not making that point now. I'm just giving the context. That's what was the conversation. Hence,
Okay.
And so after, if I would have died, I wanted the joke to live on.
Yep.
This is how far I'm taking a joke. I was like, okay, so here's the deal. I need you to go and, this doesn't have to make sense to you, but, in the podcast, we talked about this, and I just need you to go and take my Xbox and then tell Slava that you took it. Life after laughing.
And as sad as I would be that you died, if I got a random text from your girlfriend and saying, I have the Xbox, that would probably make my day. I'd find solace well, not solace in your death, but I would find some levity in your passing.
Yeah. In that I prepared in advance that if I die, I need her to do this. This is my last request, my will and testament. Yeah. Take one item from me, just one, and then let Slava know that you took it, and tell him it's not stealing.
Yep.
Oh man. All right. Well, that's the episode. I'm so glad that you could join us, Spencer, on this
it was
celebratory.
great. It was good meeting you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna try and get Spencer back in on some other Cosmere books because I think it'll be fun.
Do it.
Yeah, I'd love to join and see where you're at and experience your journey through this.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy to share it because, like I said, I'm a bit reserved because of all the things we already said. But it seems people do want to hear it, and I'm happy to play along because this project, as we're calling it, of ours between me and Jonathan, it's a thing I'm serious about. So I'm going to give it my all.
Nice. Very cool.
One last note from me, because I thought this was really interesting. So I had a call today for work, and it's this I'm vetting a vendor to be like, hey, can we use your product, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, wow, you got a nice microphone set up there. You probably do a podcast or whatever. I was like, actually, I do. He's like, I know, because I stalked you on the internet. And I was like, what? What? I was like, I don't have my name on my last name on any of it. And he's like, but I know that you run the SideQuest podcast. And I was like,
holy shit.
Okay.
All right.
Respect.
Wow. Yeah.
It was so,
wow.
I was like, okay. And then when later in the conversation, I was like, did you ever search me out? What did I say? I said, okay, you found that, but did you find when I was doing anime watch-throughs? And he's like, no. And I was like, good.
I saw only one of those, and it was the most acid trip portion of the thing too. So Jonathan sends me a link to here's my anime watch throughs, and so I click play and fast forward 3 minutes or 40 seconds or whatever it was. I just fast forward a little bit to when I think, okay, con was definitely started. The intro chit chat is over, and it was something about defecating or something, and I was like, what? How? What's going on?
That's oh my goodness. Yeah, that would be an interesting part of the conversation to step in on there.
Yeah.
Well, I was just really surprised that this guy because Slava and I haven't put our last names on this podcast, and we've only told our close friends hey, I'm doing this thing, listen to it because I need you to tell me if I'm an idiot or not. Well, that's not the question I asked because people will answer it honestly. I haven't even told my family about this. Shout out mom and dad.
Yeah, I told a few people, and it has come up in conversations naturally at work, and so now I have 2 listeners from work that might be joining the crew here or the audience. But other than that, I've told nobody. I forget where I was going. I was going to piggyback what Jonathan was saying, but it's funny that you have a creeper vendor. Whatever.
Whatever, indeed. Anyway, thanks for joining us. Goodbye,
But
good
no,
people.
Mr. Creeper Man, please continue to listen to the SideQuest podcast.
I don't think that he's going to actually... I don't think he actually listened to it. I think he's a salesman. He was just looking for a talking point. He's like, is that a microphone? Are you happy to see me? That was his opener. And I was like, you got the sale, bud.
It is both.
Usually when our podcasts end, they digress quickly.
Into this acid trip that we're doing now. So what I do...
Very interesting.
Yeah, so what I do is I just say, goodbye, good people. And that ends the podcast.
That's it. That's good.
All right.